9 years ago, when I begged my parents for help with college tuition, they looked at me and said, "Be independent." I struggled alone, built everything on my own. And then one day, the same parents called me, crying, asking for help. What I did next changed our family forever. Segment 1. My name is Elena Carter. And 9 years ago, I sat at our old wooden dining table with my college acceptance letter in my trembling hands. I remember how hopeful I felt, how proud, how terrified. Tuition was more than I could ever afford alone. So I did what daughters are supposed to do. I asked my parents for help. My voice was small but steady. I got in. I just need some support with tuition. My father didn't even look up from his coffee. My mother sighed like I had asked for something unreasonable. "I'll be independent," my dad said flatly, as if those 2 words were life advice instead of a door slamming shut. I tried explaining. Scholarships covered some. I would work part-time. I just needed help with the gap. My mother shook her head. "What, we struggled on our own. So will you." That night I cried quietly in my room, not because of the money, but because of the message. "You're on your own." Something shifted in me after that. I stopped expecting warmth, stopped expecting guidance, stopped expecting them to show up. I took student loans that felt heavier than textbooks, worked double shifts at a cafe between classes, skipped meals to save money, and pretended I wasn't exhausted. Every time I felt like giving up, those words echoed. Be independent. So I did. I built walls where comfort used to live, discipline where affection used to sit. Graduation day came without them in the crowd. They said they were busy. I told myself I didn't care, but I did. I moved to a new city with nothing but debt and determination, telling myself independence wasn't rejection. It was strength. I repeated that lie until it felt true. Years passed. Promotions came slowly. The loans shrank gradually. The loneliness became familiar. I stopped calling home often. Conversations felt formal, distant, like we were relatives instead of family. And somewhere along the way, I realized I had grown up without them, not because I wanted to, but because they told me to. I didn't know it then, but those 2 words would come back, louder, heavier, 9 years later, when the same people who told me to stand alone would suddenly need me. Independence is a strange thing. It hardens you quietly. By the time I was 27, I had paid off most of my loans, climbed into a management role at a financial firm, and finally signed papers for my own apartment. I remember sitting alone on that empty floor, keys in my hand, whispering. I did it. There was no applause. No proud parents calling to celebrate. Just silence and the hum of the city outside my window. But I felt strong, earned. My parents and I spoke on holidays mostly. Surface conversations, weather updates, polite check-ins. They never asked how I survived those early years. Never asked how many nights I worked until midnight. Never asked how many times I broke down in the storage room at the cafe because exhaustion felt unbearable. Maybe they assumed independence meant I didn't need comfort, or maybe they simply believed struggle builds character. I used to wonder if they ever regretted their decision, but I stopped asking questions that had no answers. Then one evening, 9 years after that dining table conversation, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded different, softer, uncertain. "Elena, we need to talk." My stomach tightened instantly. "Parents don't call like that unless something is wrong," she explained slowly. My father's business had failed. Investments collapsed. Medical bills piled up after his surgery. They were drowning. I listened quietly, heart beating louder with every detail. Then she said the words I never expected to hear. "We need help." There was a long pause between us, thick with history. I stared at my reflection in the dark window, seeing the woman I had become, independent, stable, cautious. Memories flooded back. The coffee mug, the acceptance letter, be independent. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had taught me self-reliance, and now they were asking me to carry them. My chest felt tight, not with anger, but with confusion. Was this karma? Was this responsibility? Was this love being tested? I didn't answer right away. I just said, "I'll think about it." And when I hung up, I realized independence had prepared me for many things, but not this. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the past like a movie I couldn't pause. The day they refused me, the years I survived alone, the pride I forced into existence. Part of me wanted to say no immediately, to echo their own advice back at them. Be independent. It would have been easy. satisfying even. But another part of me remembered birthdays, bedtime stories, the way my dad taught me to ride a bike, the way my mom braided my hair before school. People are rarely just one moment. They are a collection of choices, good and bad. By morning, I had decided to visit them. When I walked into my childhood home, it felt smaller somehow, like time had shrunk it. My father looked older, thinner, pride replaced by quiet embarrassment. He avoided my eyes at first. We sat at that same dining table, the same wood that once witnessed my rejection. My mother explained the debts in detail, numbers scribbled on paper, desperation hidden beneath forced calm. "We didn't plan for this," she said softly. I nodded, understanding more than they realized. Life rarely follows plans. Then my father finally spoke, his voice unsteady. "We were wrong back then." The words hung in the air, fragile, unexpected. I didn't react immediately. I needed to hear more than regret. I needed acknowledgement. "When you told me to be independent," I said carefully, "it hurt more than you knew." Silence followed, heavy but honest. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We thought pushing you would make you strong," she whispered. I took a slow breath. Maybe it did, but strength born from abandonment feels different than strength born from support. I looked at them, not as the people who denied me, but as flawed humans who made a harsh decision. And I realized this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about who I wanted to be. I agreed to review their finances first, not as a daughter handing over money blindly, but as the independent woman I had become. I spent hours analyzing statements, debts, options. The situation was serious but not hopeless. They had made risky investments, trusted the wrong partners, delayed seeking help out of pride. Pride, the same force that once told me to stand alone. I presented them with a structured plan: sell unnecessary assets, downsize the house, restructure remaining debt, and yes, I would contribute a significant amount to stabilize things. My father looked stunned. "You'd do that?" he asked quietly. I met his eyes steadily. "I'm independent." Remember, there was no sarcasm in my tone, only clarity. Independence didn't mean isolation. It meant choice, and I was choosing to help, not because I owed them, but because I wanted to break the cycle of cold lessons. My mother began to cry softly, relief mixing with guilt. "We should have helped you," she said. Hearing that didn't erase the past, but it softened it. Over the next months, I guided them through every step, teaching them budgeting tools, setting strict boundaries, ensuring my support had limits. I refused to sacrifice my own stability. Because independence also means protecting yourself. Slowly, the tension shifted into collaboration. My father began asking my advice regularly, not as authority, but as respect. And somewhere in those conversations, we started rebuilding something fragile. Trust. It wasn't perfect. Scars remained, but growth often grows around scars. 9 years ago, they told me to be independent, and I thought it meant I was alone. Today, I understand it differently. Independence gave me strength, discipline, resilience, but compassion gave me peace. Helping them didn't erase what happened. It redefined it. One evening after we finalized the last restructuring document, my father looked at me across that same dining table and said, "You didn't just become independent. You became better than we were." His voice broke slightly, not from weakness, but from humility. I felt something loosen in my chest, something I had carried for almost a decade. Forgiveness doesn't arrive loudly. It settles quietly, like dust after a storm. I realized I had spent years proving I didn't need them, when in truth I needed closure more than anything. Independence without empathy becomes cold. Empathy without boundaries becomes fragile. I had finally found balance. As I left their house that night, I paused at the doorway, remembering the girl who once stood there holding an acceptance letter, a heart full of hope. I wish I could tell her that the rejection wouldn't define her, that she would rise, that one day the same words meant to harden her would become her strength. "Be independent," they said. And I was independent enough to succeed, independent enough to survive, and independent enough to choose forgiveness when they needed me most.